In the wake of the 20th century, a new force emerged on the world stage, the Mujahideen. Born in the 1970s, during the heat of the Afghan resistance against the Soviet invasion, this group etched its name in the annals of history. Their origin story is one of fervor, fueled by a strong desire for national preservation. With foreign support, particularly from the United States and Pakistan, their cause gained momentum and their ranks swelled. The birth of the Mujahideen was marked by fervor and a strong desire for national preservation. The 1980s saw the Mujahideen thrown into the crucible of war. As Afghanistan found itself caught in the crossfire of the Cold War, the Mujahideen emerged as unlikely warriors, facing off against the Soviet forces. The Mujahideen weren't a monolithic entity, but rather a patchwork of various groups, each with its own distinct ideology and leadership. Despite their differences, these factions were bound by a common goal: to free their homeland from foreign control. This unity and diversity was one of their greatest strengths, enabling them to engage in an effective guerrilla warfare against a more technologically advanced adversary. The Mujahideen's guerrilla tactics were impressive, to say the least. They adopted hit-and-run strategies, ambushes, and sabotage, turning the rugged Afghan terrain into a strategic advantage. They knew their land, they knew the mountains and the valleys, and they used this knowledge to resist, to fight back. However, it wasn't just their strategies that stood out, it was their resilience. Despite the onslaught of the Soviet forces, despite the hardships and the sacrifices, the Mujahideen held on. They endured, they persisted, they resisted. They faced losses, both on the battlefield and off it, but they never wavered from their cause. Despite the odds, the Mujahideen held their ground, becoming a symbol of resistance. This period of war was a crucible, a testing ground, and it reshaped the Mujahideen, molding them into a force that would continue to shape Afghanistan's future. With the end of the war came a new challenge: the power vacuum. As the Soviet forces retreated, the Mujahideen, the very group united in their opposition, found themselves without a common enemy. The cohesion that had once defined them began to crumble, giving way to a fragmentation that would plague the nation. Victory had been achieved, but the cost was a nation divided, with various Mujahideen factions vying for control. The war had ended, but peace was still a distant dream. The country fell into a brutal civil war, with each faction seeking to enforce its own vision of Afghanistan's future. In the midst of this chaos, a new group emerged from the Mujahideen's ranks: the Taliban. Originating as a small movement in the early 90s, the Taliban was initially hailed as a potential source of stability. They promised an end to the chaos, a return to Islamic law, and a unified Afghanistan. And for a while, it seemed as though they might deliver on these promises. But as the Taliban's influence grew, so too did their extremism. Their interpretation of Islamic law became increasingly harsh, their methods more brutal. The liberators had become oppressors. The end of one conflict only paved the way for another, reshaping the landscape of Afghanistan. The vacuum left by the war had been filled, but the cost was a nation under the harsh rule of the Taliban, a legacy that continues to haunt Afghanistan to this day. The Mujahideen's legacy is a complex tapestry, woven with threads of resistance, conflict, and transformation. Born out of Afghanistan's resistance against the Soviet invasion in the 70s, they exhibited resilience and strategic guerrilla tactics that surprised the world. But the story didn't end there. When the war dust settled, the story took a dramatic turn. The Mujahideen fragmented, and from its ashes rose the Taliban, an Islamic fundamentalist group that would hold the world's attention, for better or worse. Their legacy, however, is not confined to the annals of history. The Mujahideen's influence permeates modern Afghan politics and the ongoing conflict. They are seen as freedom fighters by some, warlords by others, and their role in the current Afghan landscape remains substantial. Internationally, the perception of the Mujahideen is just as varied. Some laud their resistance against a superpower, while others scrutinize their subsequent actions and the rise of the Taliban. The Mujahideen's legacy is a reflection of Afghanistan's tumultuous past and present. It is a mirror reflecting the struggles, triumphs, and transformations of a nation caught in the crossfire of global politics. But remember, this is not a static image. The story of the Mujahideen continues to evolve, reflecting the ever-changing political and social landscape of Afghanistan.